French to see a person walking in the street in sleeping pajamas, because local culture told them you cannot come out sleeping pajama, you must be properly dressed. That means ethics, whether in East or the West, is always associated with some local customs and traditions. And that means it is temporal. That also means it is particular. But when we talk about Islamic ethics, then three things must be kept in mind. First and foremost, it is not theoretical, it is applied. Secondly, it is not temporal, but universal. And thirdly, it is not a matter of some principles, but it's also a matter of certain modalities, practical demonstration of those ethical values. Keeping in mind this background, let us begin with our ये तो नाराज है अच्छा ठीक the concept of human being or man given by the Quran is it is not a biological, psychological or chemical being, a combination of some chemicals, some biological phenomena or some psychological feelings, but essentially a ethical being. Ethics means a person who is able to decide for himself or herself what is right or wrong at one point. Therefore, human being was created as Allah's Khalifa, which was given the liberty to obey or not to obey. That means an ethical being who opted for obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by choice. Therefore, to become abd became the ideal of this Khalifa. But it was not left for us to give some directions about what is meant by Khilafah. This Khilafah of human being and Ubudiyya was translated into a practical example. Therefore, ethics becomes not a theoretical construct, but a matter of how it was done, practiced, and demonstrated by the ideal human being. And that is in front of you. Now, that keeping in mind, since the focus is a perfect human being, an ethical human being who has been categorized by the Quran as one who is at the highest level of ethical conduct. وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. Therefore, this ideal and this ethical model is to be understood in terms of what were the attributes and qualities of this ideal human being, which was also made an example for human beings which they can imitate. This ideal is not beyond human reach, but this ideal is easily replicable, easily applicable by human beings in their conduct and behavior. So, first and foremost, the desired personal attributes that were indicated by the Quran and the Prophet example is that of taqwa and sidq. Taqwa is not confined to fear of Allah, but it refers to all those behavioral aspects where a person wants to keep Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala happy and pleased. Therefore, so long a person is keeping Allah happy, he is observing taqwa. When he starts annoying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has moved from taqwa. So it's not just fear, but it is essentially a positive approach in life. And then it is to be followed by sidq, because sidq is not a matter of just speaking correct things, but sidq means validation. Sidq means verification. Sidq means practical demonstration of what one believes is confirmed by one's action. Therefore, these two aspects go together. Naturally, with that, the next attribute is dependence on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's assistance, and therefore sabr and persistence, which is an aspect of ethics. Anyone who loses hope also loses iman, also loses akhlaq. Akhlaq is not separated from all those aspects. Therefore, seeking constancy, doing things continuously, is a requirement of ethical conduct. A person who keeps on changing with the wind cannot be called an ethical person. And mind you, all these attributes which you are discussing are not Muslim specific either. These attributes given as practically demonstrated by the Prophet, peace be upon him, are addressed to the whole of humanity. It is short-sightedness of Muslims who think Sharia is for Muslims. Sharia is never for Muslims. Sharia is for the whole of humanity. Therefore, whatever attributes are discussed, they are not a matter of if Muslims are observing constancy, they will succeed. If a non-Muslim observes, he will fail. Every single ethical attribute which is given by the Quran has equal application for a Muslim and non-Muslim. Therefore, the uninterrupted persistence in doing a thing and its communication. The words used are usbiru wa sabiru. It's not just a matter of one's own self, but it is firm standing, steadfastness at the same time, its communication to others, persuasion to others, education to others, and that brings a promise of falah and success from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. While doing things persistently, it's also important to understand that unless there is a feeling of contentment, sabr is not complete. Sabr is persistence as well as contentment. So one has to contain. One does not have to be greedy. One does not have to go out of limits, but one has to develop an attitude. And all these are behavioral categories. These are not theoretical principles. These are applied principles. These are applicable in every age and every time. Now, how these attributes are to be inculcated? The answer is provided by two things. First and foremost is salah, and second is infaq. Anyone who is non-serious about salah will have no seriousness about promise, because salah confirms a promise of ubudiyah. When a person moves to masjid, then he is declaring he is abd. And when he is away from salah, he is not declaring he is an abd of Allah, but an abd of his personal interest, his social standing, his economic benefit, whatever it may be. And similarly, when someone is accumulating, acquiring as much resources as possible, and not offering those resources for those who are in need more than the person, then these two aspects tell us about ethics of the person. Is this person ethical or unethical? Ethics comes into existence when these two aspects are fully observed and applied. Again, these are not theoretical principles, but these deal with the social and personal behavior of every individual. Similarly, when one faces any difficulties and hardships, then in an approach which is based on resolution, based on confidence, based on dependence completely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Next to it is another attribute which is balance and moderation. The Quran tells us that when a believer is going to masjid, then he's not supposed to go in a very casual manner, but in a very formal manner. When the Quran says acquire zina, it means that you must be tidy, you must be presentable, you must be having a beautiful appearance and not just keeping best dress for appearance in an interview and the most lousy dress to go and make ibadah in masjid. That also means that one has to be extremely moderate and balanced in one's appearance, one's talk, one's behavior, in everything. So the Quran brings both aspects, that you acquire beauty. At the same time, it tells us that you are not going to do asraf. You are not going to uh, spend extra amount on showing off that your dress is branded, and only branded dress is used for going to masjid. Both extremes are to be avoided. This balance and moderation is not confined to dress, but it is also extended to one's communication, behavior, one's protest, one's trying to communicate with people, all those aspects, and at the same time, one's spending in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to be very stringent, nor to be extra generous, but a moderate approach in all those aspects. At the same time, it requires that an ethical person has to be humble, cannot be a proud person, cannot be a person who is suffering from ego syndrome, egocentric, who is always looking for his own recognition, his protocols, his uh, respect by the people, all those aspects which are part of our culture are condemned by the Quran, and therefore it is said that how you talk with people humbly, how you walk humbly, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not love those who are arrogant or extravagant or who raise their voice unnecessarily. Then observance of kindness to others and removal of all evils. Ethical person cannot be a silent observer who just observes and says, what can I do? This is the norm. This is what people are doing. We cannot change society. We cannot improve people. They are hopeless people. The nation is dead. They don't respond. We keep on calling them, but no one comes forward to join us. Therefore, hopelessness and considering their own selves as superior as compared to others. When we talk about hopelessness of a nation, then the presumption is that nation has no brain, has no character, has no standing, but people who are limited in number, a group of people who think they are guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are leaders of ummah, they are the persons who are understanding the challenge of the age and they are responding to it. But the people are just blind persons and they have no sense. And that gives a refuge, a kind of satisfaction to people, and they withdraw further. So the Quranic instruction is that you have to keep on fighting for removal of fasad and fitna and so on. It is also necessary that the characteristics should include hospitality and welcome to people. Therefore, the Quran refers to the behavior of Ansar, who welcomed not only the people who came from Makkah, but they offered them everything from depth of their heart, not just to show, but it's with sincerity. Similarly, it requires fulfillment of covenants and promises, and these covenant promises are not just those oaths which people take when they join an institution or when they have a graduation, but this covenant and ahad and misaq, all those words used in the Quran, they refer to every small and big action of human beings. If a person does not smile at the time of smiling, this is a breach of contract. If a person is not feeling unhappy and angry at a time it requires that, it's a breach of contract. Therefore, the Quran says very clearly that our responses should indicate what is right and wrong. If something unethical is going on, then it says that those who are Allah conscious, they pass on it with dignity. If something wrong is done, it says they stand up firm against it. And similarly, when a person is greeting the other person, it says that you should greet the person with adding more prayer for him or with a smile, the hadith tells us. Therefore, it is not a matter of just any oath taken, but every single action of a believer can be ethical or unethical if the concept of contractual agreement with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with family, with society, with organization, with everything is not kept in mind. And then the ethical requirement for social behavior is that they should have a very clear concept of trusteeship and meritocracy. That a person in his behavior is not favoring people because of his political affiliation. That a person is not favoring others because of some ideological considerations, irrespective of merit. The words are very, very clear that you have to follow approach of objectivity as a trustee and make sure that only a person who is capable, not because a person belongs to your ideology and extremely incapable, you appoint him, but only those persons who are capable of that requirement, that job, they need to be considered. Therefore, it's merit and not just a matter of a group or a clan of people. At the same time, ethics means that one has to develop attitude of generosity. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was extremely generous, extremely helping to others. And therefore, those who are supposed to be ethical persons are those who make their amwal, their properties, their resources available, both hidden and in an open manner. At the same time, the person, whoever is thinking that's personal ethics, has to be aware of worldly attractions which quite often deviate us from ethical behavior. And therefore, when a person becomes attracted towards high positions, high titles, and feels elated by that, then this is a sign of deviation from the covenant, the ahad a person made to be abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another important aspect, to help even persons who have not been helpful, cooperative, or respectful. Therefore, the Quran tells us even those who have harmed you, you cannot harm them just in retaliation. But your better approach, ethical approach, is that even persons who may defame you, you do not look towards them with a grudging eye, but you have to develop an attitude of tolerance, acceptance, and their accommodation. And then it tells us that you have to develop an attitude of forgiveness, which is an ethical quality. Uh, Unfortunately, human beings have a uh, memory which preserves every small event that goes against them and forgets hundreds of favors they received from same person. And that happens to more and more with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If he has given 5,000 blessings and only one pain in a limb or one aspect of sickness, then the person cries and yells and says, why me? Why I am subject to all this torture and pain, and why Allah is testing me? But forgets that those 5,000 things which are there, which are blessings, those are never noticed. So forgiveness is extremely important in the sense of disregarding many things and seeking, because if we don't seek Allah's forgiveness and if we don't forgive others, then we are not qualified to get that reward from Him when He judges our own behavior. Then maturity and tenderness, which means that in many situations a person has to overlook, disregard, behave as if he is not aware of anything. We don't have to respond to every small thing all the times, but make a judgment. Is this the appropriate time to respond to it? Or I sleep on it, and when there is proper time, I respond to it. Therefore, in many situations, an ethical judgment means that you are not all the times standing for so-called kalimatul haq. On every issue, I must raise my voice and say halal and haram. Otherwise, my iman is weak. That's not what the Quran demands. What it demands is that you have to use your reason, you have to plan your action, you have to reason out what is most appropriate at a given time. And that's why the word used in the Quran quite often is rushd. Rushd does not mean just biological maturity, but rushd means all those aspects where you are able to decide for yourself what is more appropriate at a given time. And then quite often we are led to respond in the same way as we receive some behavior from others. The Quran tells us that you have to remove evil with a good attitude, not with the same attitude. If someone shouts, you also shout, makes no difference. Therefore, one has to develop an attitude, and that again is personal ethics, because without that we cannot claim to be du'at or people who understand Islamic approach. So removing wrong with good, and this can only be done by people who have patience and who have trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not for everyone to develop. That's what the Quran tells us. And then steadfastness in terms of istiqama, standing always firm, is an attribute of individual or personal ethics. It also requires sincere effort on the part of those who believe, with their own selves, with their potentialities, their attributes, qualities, skills, their resources. So in every aspect, persons have to be uh, contributing, and then it is said these are the persons who can claim to be truthful. Truthfulness is not just speaking truth. Truthfulness is when an evidence is provided by their behavior of what they claim as a believer. For such persons, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised a reward, and not only reward, but their elevation to a place of those who are Siddiq and Shaheed and Anbiya and so on and so forth. So this is how the personal ethics, when properly observed, takes us to the highest levels of reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jazakallah khair. I have tried to cover it as fast as possible, and I hope you must have several observations and questions which can be taken up now. कोई आपके इस पे सवालात और इजाफा जो आप करना चाहते हैं? जी Jazakallah. Three important points have been raised by you. Firstly, there are certain things which have universal recognition, and therefore, should we still insist that although they are accepted universally, but the values we have prevail over them, or those values are local, ours are not local. Secondly, when we look into history of mankind, then there are certain behaviors which are customary or urf, and how far this urf is the basis of Islamic akhlaq. Now, what is known as common practice, for example, is a secular curricula in America or France or Germany carries a teaching in grade 3 or 4 that children should speak truth, or when they are walking in a street, they should watch on their right and left before crossing. Road sense. When we look into it and try to find out its origin, we are told there were people known as Greek who were very thoughtful people, and they came up with the idea that you must always speak truth and don't lie. But so it doesn't end here. When you further investigate, then we find out even before these Greek and many others, from day one, when human being was created and messengers were sent to guide them, all of them said, observe sidq. This is the basic teaching of all prophets of Allah. What remains in Greek and other countries was this impact of original sidq, original obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the evidence is even where you find there is no trace of a so-called written Bible, only oral traditions exist. Like in many African tribes. In many African tribes, you find their songs which are used for their prayers, carrying very dominant elements of Tawheed. They may call that by a name, but they believe this is one and only which is doing it. And they never got a written Bible from anywhere. So even where no text was available to them, there are certain principles which were originally given to them by their leaders, whom Islam calls Anbiya. So if we go into depth and analyze, then many of those things we call universal are not universal because Greek agreed. From where do they get? From Indians? Indians from where they got? When you go investigating, then you find ultimately there is a source which is beyond human beings, and that gave them this concept, and then human beings modified it. Therefore, it is considered as universal. Now let's see whatever is claimed universal, is that universal? Those children who are taught from grade 3 that you must speak truth, the same children, when they become president of a country or president of a political party, do they always hold to truth? Do we have any evidence that the whole invasion of Iraq was made based on truth or falsehood? And many others. Therefore, what is known as universally truth is subject to certain material needs of people. So long those needs are fulfilled, then they speak truth. So long as I can sell a shirt by telling it has 60% cotton and 40% synthetic, I speak truth. But what kind of cotton I'm using, cheapest available cotton or best cotton, is not considered truth. Label only tells me 60% cotton, 40% synthetic, but never tells me is it body friendly or not, because some thread may not be body friendly. So long I'm selling it, I think I'm doing something truthfully. And it has, it can be measured, is it having 60% or not? This is what we understand by truth. But this truth again is subject to my entrepreneurial interest, which I as a capitalist decide, and then I change it. What is branding? Branding is not truth, but total falsehood. You keep on repeating, this is the only shampoo that makes your hair long, and it has chemicals and all those things which are nutritious. till people start buying it. While it may not have all those things as unique characteristics, there will be 100 more doing it. Is that truth? Although that truth is printed on every bottle of shampoo. Therefore, what's known as universally acceptable, and unfortunately, when you travel and you meet a Japanese, you meet an American, you meet a French, you feel that in certain matters, he has not kept something dubious, but made it very clear, which some other may have kept dubious. That leads you to think it's honest person. But the same person who is doing a very good transaction in economy with you, is he also that honest with his wife, with his children, with his parents? Honesty, I said a while ago, that sidq is not just a matter of speaking truth. Sidq is a matter of a personality trait. It's a behavioral category, wide application. So we cannot say whatever exists with others has universal value. On the other hand, when the Quran tells us, Kunu ma sadiqeen, then it tells us very clearly what's the meaning of these people who are Siddiq. It tells us not by theory, but by practical example. This is the model of Sidq, humanly done and demonstrated. So you have to do it. Coming to second part of your question. When we talk about, what was the second point? Yeah, urf, yeah. The ethics, whether Eastern or Western, is essentially a matter of urf, custom. Whatever was practiced in France for 100 years became their ethical behavior. After 100 years, a change took place which was not welcome. But when it became prevalent, it became good. This is the evolution of ethics in East and West. When an anthropologist goes to an African tribe and finds them uncovering upper part of their body or lower part of their body, he takes photographs and says, look, uncivilized, heathens, uncultured people. When the same anthropologist goes to San Diego Beach and finds a whole beach for nude people, he never says uncivilized, uncultured. These are cultured. Therefore, urf is not just a matter of what you have heard in a lecture by some sheikh, which says that urf is a source of Sharia. That is a separate issue. I'm not dealing with that right now. What I'm trying to share with you is that Eastern and Western ethics is essentially a manifestation of what is known as social constructs. The term used in sociology is social construct, which means a society constructs certain concepts and themes that become applicable to them and more or less obligatory for them. In France, for example, unless you toast with a glass of wine, you have no friendship with me, because that shows how strong we are, because you toasted wine for me. Why? Because it is customary, not in a book, but customary. The Quranic approach of ethics is not that urf of Arabia is Sharia, but Sharia comes and changes the urf of Arabia, which is not emphasized in our textbooks of Sharia at all. The point is not made clear to our so-called fuqaha either. You find many Muslim thinkers who have written on Islamic law saying that all these punishments and all these things were prevalent in Arabia and they have been sanctified by Quran and Sunnah, which is totally wrong. Whatever punishments exist, the Quran says, were given in earlier Sharia, not in the custom of Arabs. Whatever is given. Source is not custom. Source is wahi. And that aspect is often not understood and taught in our universities that teach Islam. So Islamic approach is not that of Urf of Arabia. Islam is not Makkan customs, Medinan customs, but Islam is those customs which came into existence because of revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and because of following that revelation by the Prophet, peace be upon him. The Prophet was not Arabian Prophet. Although you find titles of Sirah books of Muhammad Arabi, it was not for Arabs. He did not came as a reformer for Arabs. The Quran says he is for the whole of humanity, not for Arabs. Kafatan linnas, and so on and so forth. So there are many aspects that need to be very clearly defined and elaborated. Among those, Urf definitely is important, but Urf has no substantial place in Islamic ethics. Islamic ethics is given by revelation and applied by the Prophet and his companions, and that's how it became a practice of the people of Medina. It was not that whatever Medina people were doing was endorsed, but it is a new paradigm, a new approach which was given, and whatever was remnant of earlier Sharia was not necessary to be replaced. If something good from earlier Sharia is there, why should the Quran replace it? So source of all those things which were not removed is Sharia, and source of things which were not there and introduced is also Sharia, but not Urf. कोई और वक्त हो गया हमारा? जी 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 जी
You said that you don't have to be advised each time something wrong is done.
जी
Exercise,
जी
patience, and
जी
this is a matter where a lot of controversy occurs in groups, in organizations, and there are separate groups having different approaches. How to deal with it? Because on a certain event, some people say that if you don't react now, it is your complacent wise. So where we find a balance in these two approaches. Generally, this occurs between more younger people versus elderly people. And
you see, it's essentially a problem of communication, not a problem of substantial difference. The Quran says very clearly that you have to invite people bil hikmah wal mu'izah hasana. And hikmah is defined very clearly as rushd, that maturity, that understanding where you are able to prioritize and decide what at a given time is more appropriate. Therefore, when a young generation or old generation is having a discussion, then they need to first come up with what is the benchmark and criteria for us to stand up and die now or die later. When that aspect is brought into discussion, then you bring a consensus. When without sharing that basis, since you are an authority and they are your workers, or the contrary, then you never bridge the gap. Then you always have lack of communication. Communication means those foundations on which we are deciding, those should be defined, shared, and based on them, we make a decision. Unfortunately, we never follow that approach. Those in authority have no time to elaborate and share what are the reasons behind what they are doing. They think that if they give all those reasons, they might disclose some secrets. There are no secrets. Everything becomes known to people today. Therefore, it is more appropriate to follow the prophetic example of, in such issues, talk openly, discuss openly, and even be prepared to suppress your own opinion, although you may be an authority. That is hikmah. That is rushd. Musa was traveling and trying to learn that rushd. And that is why you find the same thing given by the Quran with reference to not one but several Anbiya. Some were given this rushd in cradle. Someone given this rushd later on. And when they had rushd, then they were given this responsibility to educate people. So rushd and the hikmah are twin. They have to be very carefully understood and applied in decision making. We are.
So, there were a lot more things which we covered in a very short time. Each of them probably needs much more elaboration. Would be when we talk of consistency, when we are in such groups and meetings and we listen to some lectures, it keeps on a source of motivation for a couple of days or weeks, and then it. How we can, is there some mechanism and what is the means so that they become part of the personality or habits?
You see, the reason is very simple. Anything that is discussed, if it is not translated into action points, then it is bound to fade away. What happens, we listen to a very good lecture and appreciate that and feel we learned something. We never take out of it action points, what needs to be done. And if we take out action points, not too many, even 2 or 3, and write them down, and then make a routine to check next few days, out of these 3 or 4 points, did I apply 1 or 2 or 3 or how many? Then whatever is said becomes much meaningful. Therefore, when the Quran says, why you say something which you are not doing, it's not just a matter of not having double speak, but it's a matter of what you are listening or studying. Do you have action points from that? If you have no action points, that you are just listening for enjoyment, but not for learning. Listening and learning are 2 separate things. You can listen to a very beautiful lecture and learn nothing out of it. But if you listen to something very simple and that leads you to think about some action points in your own mind, then even that very simple and unsophisticated talk can be more useful than a very philosophical discussion. So it depends on the people. Those who want to learn, they can learn even from wrong behavior of others. When they see someone doing something wrong, they can learn, I should not do it. Not only following what is good, but it can be learned from even a evildoer. I should not do it. So it's a matter of approach. If approach is of learning, then from every single word you hear or read, you can dig out some action points. And that's what is missing mostly in many organizations.
Or when you talk about fulfillment of covenants and promises,
जी जी
सिर्फ अहद के बारे में इस पे भी